Hey guys, it's vf.miniatures Warhammer Tactics series, and today I want to discuss making Magnus playable again, because I think he's too weak for what he costs and for what he is, and I believe there are some ways to solve this problem, and he should definitely be used more in Thousand Suns army, because he's a freaking Primarch. So let's try to figure out how to make Magnus playable again. And let's start with a disclaimer. Don't get me wrong, Magnus is definitely a badass model. It has a lot of good things about it, but the problem is that he's only really a badass in 8th edition, because nowadays when you've got all those crazy weapons with crazy damage, all those mortal wounds running around, or being thrown around, should I say, he's definitely not survivable enough. The problem with him is not his damage output or mortal wounds output, even though I believe that he should be the only model in the game who has 4 casts and he only has 3. I don't agree with him having as many casts as Ironman. But anyways, I think that Magnus is okay in terms of damage output, but where he definitely is lacking is his survivability. It's just that models like him, that you already pay a tax for having all that value inside just one single model, and it's already bad for you in terms of damage distribution and line of sight and etc. So guys like him should have more than just a basic 4-up, not so invulnerable anymore save and -1 damage and 18 wounds. Especially considering the fact that it's almost impossible to hide him. So you would probably need a huge line of sight blocking piece of terrain which is completely obscuring. So it's not obscuring because of the rule, which he obviously it doesn't work for him because he has 18 wounds. I mean that it's just a flat wall with no windows, something like that. A huge terrain piece like a hill maybe could hide him, but I'm not sure even about that because his wingspan is just enormous. And to add to all his problems, you can't even deep strike him for free, even though Thousand Suns are considered to be like masters of the warp, of webway, and they all know those secret paths around the webway and all that. Even though they are masters of the warp, they somehow don't know how to deep strike their own Primarch, which is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. You should not have to pay 3 command points to dip strike a model which is the embodiment of warp and teleportation and magic. Anyways, that's why he always loses in this competition between a squad of 10 Scarbical Terminators and him. It's just the problem of models like Magnus, Mortarion. They don't really belong in the setting of the game that we are used to playing, like 2000 points. So they are demon Primarchs. They are supposed to be like the one and only thing, which is he just appears on the battlefield and half of the opponent's army is already dead just from looking at him. Just get that into your head. Magnus costs 420 points. Do you know what else costs 420 points? 20 Incursors or 20 Intercessors if you give Sergeants Power Fists. Can you just wrap your mind around this concept? A demon Primarch, the son of the Emperor himself, on all the juices and buffs that the Chaos Gods gave him, and 20 Chads with boulders. They cost the same in the game that we are playing. That's the main issue with guys like him. So he should probably cost more like 1,000 at least, at the very least, because obviously this is a game and the points values do not always represent the actual value of the model. But anyways, that's the problem, and that's why I'm going to propose some things that we can do to solve the issue with his survivability. So the first way to solve the problem with his survivability is going the Gasgul, Citan, whatever you call it, way. So basically, limit the amount of wounds he can take in a single phase. You can do that like 9 wounds a phase, which would be nice because Dinch 9, you get that. And also it will prevent him from dying in the first phase, in the first shooting phase ever. So he will not die unless he gets charged or he gets mortal wounds in some weird, strange ways, which is very, very unlikely. Also considering that you have 2 ways to heal him in the Thousand Suns book, it's Temporal Manipulation, Psychic Power, and the stratagem called Warp Regeneration, where you need to cast a natural 9, I think, with that spell to heal something, and he can heal himself in this manner. So it will mean that even 2 shooting only phases won't be enough to bring him down. So without actually really making him stronger or tougher, we are just making sure that he can stay longer on the battlefield, but not too long. So we don't want to make it like 3-4 wounds like with Gaskell or Citans, because he's a much chunkier boy. So he needs to be killable, but not as fast. It'll definitely force you to be extremely careful with him and cover him with screens from all sides. But I think that definitely solves the problem of his total uselessness if you are playing against something like Tau and there's no big line of sight blocking piece of terrain in your deployment zone. So in that case, you either have to spend 3 command points just knowing for the fact that you will lose Magnus in the first turn, which is very bad because 3 command points, especially in Nephilim, is just crazy to spend. Or be prepared to lose him if you go first, and probably make him an almost useless model, because in the first turn you won't probably get any value from him even if you go first, because yeah, he can cast a couple of buffs, yeah, he can possibly get a couple of smites off, but that's it. That's not 420 points. What I fear with this solution is that it locks Magnus into the role of an artillery piece. So everyone will probably start using him just as a smite machine. So he will be standing surrounded by rubrics, and he will be just smiting, and healing until he eventually, someone eventually gets rid of him, either by charging him or maybe getting a successful smite off against him, which would be extremely hard because of all these buffs and reroll, deny, and so on and so forth. So highly unlikely, but yet possible. So that's the problem. I don't really think that Magnus should be that. I think he should be a frontline commander like all Primarchs are supposed to be. And that's the problem with making this a rule. But he probably can still be used in this manner. It just would mean that you will lose him faster if you use him aggressively, which is not a wrong thing in terms of how the game should work. Next option we've got. It's a very interesting one. I've read it on Reddit and I'm ready to share it with you. It's a teleportation after damage. So it's like another look on the relic that Grey Knights have in their book called Sigil of Agents, where you can teleport away. You can't teleport away from the board, but you can teleport to another place on the board. And that's the difference that I am going to propose. So basically, when you are being targeted by a shooting attack, in Grey Knights relic's case, you can teleport to another place on the battlefield. You can do that once. What I propose for Magnus is we basically give him an ability to teleport to a different place on the board or go into Deep Strike after he receives a certain amount of damage. So he basically understands that the situation is going in the wrong direction and he needs to get out of dodge. So it prevents him from being annihilated in the first turn, which is what we are trying to do. We're trying to make him worthy of his 420 points. Plus, I know that probably Games Workshop are reserved about giving him ability to deep strike freely because he's a 420 points model, which is relatively hard to kill and with a very high damage output. So he can do a lot of damage coming from deep strike. So probably they are afraid that it will give you an unfair advantage if you can hide such a big asset in deep strike without paying for it. And I understand that. But in this case, you will pay for getting into deep strike for free by actually losing 9 of your wounds. And then you'll be able to come on the board and do the damage that you have to. Or if you go first, you will actually be able to use him in some fashion until he gets those 9 wounds and you can get away from the other attacks. Also, the rule will definitely need to be carefully worded as to prevent this strange, janky interactions, and also we may need to limit the amount of teleportations to maybe 2 per game, so that he cannot do this 3 times, which would be probably a bit stupid, but 1 or 2 times is definitely okay in my opinion. At least tell me what you think in the comment. Third approach we have is basically general stats boost, so we can increase the wounds he has to 24, 26 to make sure that he can stay alive as long as necessary for such a big model. And that's a very why I don't like the third way to go, because the necessary amount of wounds or the necessary survivability is a very hard thing to calculate, because some armies have much better shooting phase, some armies have a much worse shooting phase, and it would be hard to balance, because if you balance Magnus so that he can't be killed as fast as needed by Tau army in the shooting phase, it would make it almost impossible for someone in, for example, Orc army to even deal enough damage to him in the shooting phase. Enough, I mean, like bracket him at least. So that's something that we need to consider in this case. So that's my concern. But anyways, we can just generally boost his stats to 24, 26 wounds, or instead lower that to 17 to allow him to benefit from obscuring, which is something I've heard a lot of people talk about in the Thousand Suns community. Additionally, grant him the Abaddon-like Favored by Tzeentch ability to ignore 1 failed saving throw per turn, but unlike Abaddon, which he ignores the first wound that he receives, so the first failed saving throw, Magnus will be able to choose the wound he ignores. And it's much better because obviously, for example, if you're playing against Tau and there is a railgun over there, you definitely want to ignore that railgun shot and not some Fire Warrior's plasma rifle wound. We can do that in combination with increasing the amount of wounds he has, and I think that would be probably a nice spot for him to be in, because I don't think that he would be unkillable. I don't think that he would be too overpowered. Maybe like you can bump him up to 450 points, but that's generally it. He would be okay at this point. Another unusual way we can bump up his survivability is by giving him a Votan's Void Armor ability, so no rerolls to wound damage against him. I don't think that thematically really works for him, not as well as the Favored by Tzeentch ability, but it's something again that can be used in combination with the other option to get to that sweet spot of survivability to his price. And the last one is the Demon save. So as you know, in the new Demon Codex, the Chaos Demons Codex, there was introduced such a thing as a Demon save, which is basically the real invulnerable save. And I've said it multiple times that it's extremely stupid that Games Workshop is going after invulnerable saves, which have their meaning inside their name. They should be invulnerable, so cannot be modified or ignored, but they keep on introducing the weapons that ignore invulnerable saves, which is stupid. But anyway, so the Demon save is the true invulnerable save. So you cannot increase that, you cannot lower it. So it's as is stated in your datasheet. And I think that we should give that to both Morty, obviously, because he's also a Demon Primarch, and to Magnus. So Morty should stay with his 4-up against melee, 4-up against shooting, and Magnus, I think, deserves a 4-up against melee and 3+ invulnerable against shooting, because he is favored by Tzeentch. So he is so good at predicting what is going to happen, so he does not really care about Tau railgun coming from around the corner and shooting him in the eye, because he already knew that the railgun is standing over there and that a sneaky Tau pilot is planning to attack him. He already knows that because he predicted it, so that's why he has a 3+ invulnerable save, which cannot be modified. That's what I believe would be okay for him. Obviously, if you give him a 3-up invulnerable save, you cannot really increase his survivability even more. Not in a big way, maybe like add 2 wounds to him, maybe something like that, but not majorly, because otherwise you risk making him too hard to kill. And that will be okay also because Mortarion will still be a bit tougher because of his toughness 8 and 5+ shrug, which is obviously more than even the 3+ invulnerable that Magnus would get. So that's the general idea of the demon save on these two Primarchs and Magnus in particular. I'm still not sure that a 3+ invulnerable against shooting would completely fix Magnus' survivability problem, because it would only partially fix that against shooting, but once he gets into combat, he's back in the too easy to kill town. So maybe we would need to use something that we discussed in the 3 first steps. Maybe giving him an ability to ignore first wound, maybe giving him a couple more wounds, something like that, but definitely not making him cheaper, because Magnus should be an expensive model, because he's a Demon Primarch, a unique thing in the Warhammer universe, and he should be powerful as no one else. So that's it, guys. I hope this video was useful for you. Tell me what you think about Magnus. Tell me if there is maybe something that I've missed. Maybe there is some other way we could make Magnus more survivable. Tell me if you think that he really needs help. Maybe you think that he is good enough as he is. So I'm really curious to hear your opinion. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.